A small village in the heart of Germany is the favorite summer resort for storks. The locals are particularly neighborly, and that gives them special insights. The storks must deal with all kinds of challenges. And they give their hosts quite a hard time, too. But what is it that draws the birds to this particular place? And why does Rühstädt top the bill as the #1 stork village? Mid-March, and the dormant winter season is over in Rühstädt, a small village in Brandenburg. Resident stork fans have already started work. They're constructing a new nesting spot. Mayor and conservationist Jürgen Herper lends a hand himself. The 60-year-old knows exactly how to attract storks. A good portion of meadow soil makes it all nice and comfortable. Stork nests put a lot of extra weight on a roof. Jürgen Herper repairs the damage. There's not much time left. The guests are already on their way. While the storks have long departed African shores, their seasonal hosts are busy preparing their summer quarters. Too much soil and twigs from last year. Out it goes. Encrusted refuse gets the same treatment. Nest cleaning is all part of the bird lovers' room service. The focal point is the old water tower. It's the symbol of Rühstädt and luxury accommodation for the airborne guests. Late March, and the time has come. After a flight of several thousand kilometers, the storks return to their nursery grounds. The village offers 50 nests to its feathered lodgers, though it has a mere 200 residents itself. The male storks arrive first. Creatures of habit, they head straight for their usual summer nest. And the picture postcard idyll is complete. The season has begun and certainly keeps one person on his toes. Mayor Jürgen Herper. He has his own theory about why the storks have singled out his town in particular.
Ob sie das Ortsschild Rühstädt lesen können, wage ich zu bezweifeln.
Well, I shouldn't think they follow the road signs. They have to get to the river Elbe. It's buried instinctively in their genes. The Elbe is Germany's last major breeding ground for the white stork. So whether their flyway to the river is via Spain or Turkey, they'll land up right here, because the Elbe is their migratory boundary.
Almost all birds arriving here fly east and migrate back over the Bosporus from their winter quarters. The stork hens arrive a short while later to joyful reunions. After a journey of several weeks, some thorough personal hygiene is called for. Every feather is cleaned and put back into its proper place. This is also a good time to concentrate on their partners. The relationship has to be cemented. Storks, as we know today, are faithful to their nests rather than to a single partner. The villagers try to keep up with the situation. I've counted 19 pairs.
So 2/3 of them are here, and a few singletons.
There's still time.
Another 4 weeks.
Yeah. The guests are registered by the local accommodation agency. Jürgen Herper tries to identify them.
Both with no ring.
They're not ours.
Well, you can't really say that, but could be interesting.
Address and day of arrival are also logged.
It's important for our visitors, of course. It's nice for visitors and locals when the storks return, and they always ask, so how many have arrived already, and how many are there now, and how many do you think might still come? And you can say, well, almost 2/3 have arrived, and the rest are still on their way.
First come, first served. Furnishing materials need collecting. If you want storks in your village, you can't be too fussy about tidying up. Some local residents offer building materials especially for the birds. There's certainly plenty of choice here. Not all of them are particularly skilled at home improvements. The neighbours at nest number 11 know that teamwork wins the day. But gravity still takes its toll. Some start to redistribute resources. Latecomers have to put up with the early birds' leftovers. This is probably the fastest way to smarten up your own residence, and it will be reconstructed, altered, and extended throughout the summer. Some families are content with very little. At number 12, there are no big plans for the future. Number 1, however, is a bit of an exaggeration. A nest like this can weigh a ton. And this bird is trying to do it with as little material as possible. Clearly an experiment. Whatever the method of construction, after a few weeks, almost all the nests are occupied, old as well as new. And now they can settle down to a peaceful breeding season. Or can they? Some singletons have begun to cause a nuisance. It's the 3-year-olds returning to their breeding grounds for the first time. They have no partners as yet, and no homes. And they're a disturbance to the peace. The unruly youths are scared off, and the couples go back to enjoying their domestic bliss. Peace regained, the nest dwellers once again devote themselves to everyday matters in stork society. Most important is the constant patching up of their summer residence. Now there's a nice twig. His lady partner still has to be won over, but she accepts the minor tweak of the nest decor, and everything's fine. As darkness falls, the storks gather on the rooftops, and another nocturnal visitor arrives in the village. Now that all the storks are at home, it's time for him to get to work. Dr. Michael Katz researches the lives of migrating birds and has fitted transmitters to several of the storks.
Ah, great.
There's a transmitter in the village. The beeps give it away, but Dr. Katz isn't sure yet exactly where.
Right. Over here. I'm going to try and download it.
Using a special scanning device at a distance of 100 meters, the researcher copies all the stored data brought back on the memory chip worn by the summer guest. At 5-minute intervals, the data logger diarizes the updates. Eventually, he traces which bird it is. It's the male stork residing at number 16. The researcher is eager to see the results. Within 15 minutes, he's downloaded 50,000 data units. Now he can track the flight path taken over the past 8 months. The male stork flew south over Turkey, followed the Nile, and sailed the thermals all the way to Chad. Katz is satisfied for now. In summer, the Elbe is the ultimate goal for the storks of Rühstädt. The river's water meadows are a biosphere reserve, offering the storks plenty of feeding spots in the spring. After their long flight, they must eat and drink their fill. And there's free lodging in nearby Rühstädt. The stork's victims huddle together. With any luck, the enemy will move on to some other tasty morsel. No cornfields, no rape monoculture. The lush meadows are just one of the reasons why so many storks are attracted to this place in particular. Other creatures also benefit from the abundant supply of food. Cranes, for example. This nature paradise will soon lure many more visitors. The villagers make the necessary preparations. The mayor also has in mind his village's flightless visitors, and he takes appropriate measures.
It's to catch people's attention. Those entering Rühstädt by car who don't know the area. It's very narrow. The driver at the front is looking up, the 3 other passengers look out of their windows, and then they get a shock when another car comes at them from the opposite direction.
Storks have right of way. The birds literally take over the whole village for several months. Man and beast get a little closer to each other. The feathered guests are already attracting the first nature lovers. No sooner is everything in place than things start happening. Not up above this time, but on the ground. Shops, 3 restaurants, 2 hotels, a post office and a nursery school. Almost everyone in the village benefits from the nesting birds. The village's usual eagle symbol is now usurped by the stork. It's not that the storks lay golden eggs, but you'd be forgiven for thinking so. On the outskirts of the village, the Nature Conservation Centre crowns the area like a castle. It was built here in the bird stronghold especially to attract visitors and distribute information. For the storks, it's just a couple of extra nests. They don't know that they are the centre of attention. A camera set up by the German Society for the Conservation of Nature constantly monitors their private life. Every move in Nest 33 is recorded. Stork live show. Even the innkeeper is fascinated. They have to hurry so as not to miss anything. The storks are in breeding mood. Every move atop the water tower will be transmitted to the restaurant. And not before time, the wedding ceremony has just started, with head nodding. The local Stork Club observes its own rituals.
Nummer 13. Yup.
The members reveal their statistics. Every occupied Stork guest house is indicated by a sign on the door. Tailor-made service for Stork fanciers.
Gut, ja, alles gut. Jo, dann. Jo, zum nächsten. Jo.
Just a few days after the wedding, the first eggs appear in the nest. Thereafter, every 2 days there's another egg, until there are 5. From now on, the partners share parenting duties. The eye of the lens on the barn roof communicates the goings-on inside the nest to the main room in the Stork Club, to the delight of visitors. But everyday life among the storks isn't all idyllic. Suddenly a quarrel breaks out, and one of the parents tosses an egg out of the nest. No one can explain this behavior. The other parent stops the troublemaker. Before the eyes of the onlookers, this stork marriage falls apart. The bird left behind attempts to save the remaining eggs, but without a partner, it hasn't a chance of hatching them. On another roof, at the edge of the village, harmony seems to rule. But there's something in the air. The former partner of the nesting stork returns from the south a little late. Fiercely determined, the enraged stork hen chases off her ex-partner and his new lady friend. and destroys their clutch of eggs. Feuds like this are hard to understand, but the long-time resident doesn't care. She has her nest back. More unrest, the researchers are back. They want to take a look inside the transmitter-wearing stork's nest using a remote-controlled drone.
He's not phased at all by the drone. You have to get a bit closer. Now he's standing up, and we can tell how many eggs there are.
There are 3 eggs in the nest. The researchers will compare this number later on with the number of fledglings leaving the nest. Piece by piece, they collect the breeding success data using the latest high-tech. Research and old knowledge go hand in hand. The most important thing is to ensure that the storks have enough to eat. And their hosts leave nothing to chance. They have an ingenious plan. Ranger and Mayor Jürgen Herper now makes sure that the birds don't go hungry and monitors the situation regularly. The Elbe is the lifeline for his protégés. Herper measures the water level in the river. This is what regulates the stork's food supply, as the dikes are not entirely waterproof thanks to a somewhat paradoxical sounding scheme.
The water pressure builds up against the dike when the spring floodwaters arrive, and water penetrates the dike. It gets forced through so-called seepage water. On the inside of the dike, the water dampens large stretches of flatland and warms up quickly in the spring sunshine. These shallow, wet flats are a huge amphibian spawning ground, and we've got plenty of these zones all around Rühstädt. Frogs. If you want to have storks, you've got to have frogs.
As experienced hosts, the Rühstädt villagers know what their summer guests value most: full board. Over a dozen excavation pits were left behind when the dikes were constructed. These pools are the perfect spawning ground for frogs and are conveniently situated a mere wing beat away from the village. Within a month, the chicks are hatched. The parent stork takes preventive measures. He pokes holes in the nest. This allows rainwater to drain from the nest, making sure the young don't drown. But from above, there's quite a different danger looming. A red kite, and he's got his eye on unguarded chicks. The older stork knows what must be done. A long, pointed stork bill is quite a deterrent. The invader hesitates to see through his attack. Eventually, the bird of prey gives up. The breeding stork is not about to drop his guard. In the evenings, the summer guests leave the surrounding meadows of Rühstädt. They spend their nights in pairs in their eyries. However, their residences have no roofs, and this can be a problem. Wet and cold can turn their abode into a deadly mud bath. Those with a roof over their heads are definitely better off. So the parents stoically hold out, protecting their chicks and keeping them warm under their plumage. The parent stork checks on its young regularly. Once the rain passes, it leaves more than just the bird wet. Everything else is too. The parent birds now need to get dry as quickly as possible so as not to catch cold. At the base of the tail is a gland which secretes an oily substance. This is used to oil their wet plumage, making their feathers sleek again and able to form a warm cushion around the body. There's bad news from next door. Their chick is frail. The older stork has sensed instinctively that this little one is not going to make it. Now, in June, the sun heats up the air strongly and shines relentlessly up to 14 hours every day. The young birds pant, in danger of overheating. To quench their thirst, the parents play fire brigade. The older bird carries water in its throat pouch and regurgitates it. Parasol duty is another useful service provided by parents for their offspring. Now the young birds can be seen in their nests, they draw nature lovers in their droves. Stork TV allows everyone to join in without having to spend hours at the sun's mercy. For innkeeper Rainer Neumann, it's high season and clacking is a part of the business. He enjoys recounting the tales of some of his more outstanding house guests.
This was the pelican that arrived together with the storks on one occasion. He left a few days later. Then there was this blue stork here. It was all over the media, of course. And there was plenty of speculation as to where the blue coloring came from. We're pretty sure now that it must have been carpet dye. It probably fell into a carpet dyeing vat en route in Turkey and then managed to get out again.
The innkeeper only tells the nice stories. People rarely know about how difficult life can be for a stork. Because in high summer, there's actually a shortage of food in the fields around Rühstädt. But this is exactly the time they most need insects, worms and mice. Just to survive, a family of 5 storks has to have around 5 kilos of prey every day. Nest 20 is already having problems. Only 2 of the 3 young offspring beg for food. They literally fight each other for the food. The 3rd one gets nothing. and unnoticed by the bird fans, a drama begins to unfold high above their heads. Perhaps the weak chick is sick. The parent takes action. Maybe it's protecting its other young from becoming infected. When young birds start to die on the rooftops, the alarm goes out to Stork Club members. Uwe Weltin checks daily. Now it seems there's not enough food to go round. The fields are mowed straight away. Just what the storks have been waiting for. Insects and mice no longer have cover, and the birds make ample use of the opportunity. Jürgen Herper's agreement with the local farmers worked. They mowed just in time.
It's especially important right now because the young birds need as much food as possible to gain strength. And mowing these local fields is perfect because of the proximity to the village. You can see behind us, more birds are coming because they can hear the machines. So they'll be foraging around this whole area for themselves and their young.
Mowing the fields especially for baby birds. The grass is sent to a special biogas plant that supplies the village with power. It's a win-win situation. If there's enough food, even the stork quadruplets in number 18 have a chance of survival. They're waiting for dinner. The forager has returned home with a crop full of food. Now what it needs is the right stimulation. The young birds hiss and tap on its beak, and their parent obligingly regurgitates its finds. The number of storks in the village at the end of June is almost as high as the number of villagers. Rühstädt proudly bears the title European Stork Village. Both old and new nests have one thing in common. They silt up with soil, so they need a regular clean out. It's not really pennies from heaven around here. And that's not all their hosts have to put up with either. Rühstädt's two-legged inhabitants on the ground and in the air have come to a pretty good arrangement. They keep an eye on each other. So it doesn't go unnoticed that in number 7 there are only 2 chicks instead of 3. Uwe Weltin goes into action. Mealtime preparation by a foster parent. The pensioner has started to take care of a baby stork found in his garden. It was thrown out of the nest by its parents.
Schmeckt es heute gar nicht? Sind doch wunderbare Häppchen.
He's building up the bird's strength. It's just another part of the all-round service. The villagers don't give up on any of the birds. One floor up, the young are also being looked after. This time, it's home improvements, extending the increasingly cramped nursery. New padding is required. The little ones must be made comfortable. No sooner has the straw bed been made than it's a mess again. This stork parent just can't do right for the kids. On the other hand, the subtenants seem quite happy. These sparrows have found a nice, secure refuge in the twigs. The big and little birds get on just fine. There's certainly enough space for them all. Before the stork offspring can leave the nest, the birds have to survive yet another adventure. The hosts get a chance to see things from the stork's point of view. As every year, the conservationists need to get up close. Not being able to fly, they have to find another way. The helpless young pretend to be dead. This makes the men's work easier. At the beginning of June, each new arrival in Rühstädt is fitted with its own ID. One of their legs gets a numbered ring so they can be recognized throughout their lifetime. It's all part of a routine, as is tidying up the nest. After only a few minutes, the visit is over. The young birds relax again, and things return to normal in the village. It's time for Uwe Veltin, the adopted stork dad, to part from his protégé. He's captured all the events of the past few weeks on camera.
And now comes the move to his new residence.
The stork is moved to a nest built by kindly Mr. Veltin on a little tower nearby.
Go on, in you go. There you are. That's just fine, isn't it? It was getting a bit cramped in that big old box, and he's been itching to spread his wings.
It won't stay in Mr. Veltin's garden for long, though. The stork fans have found a new family for the foster baby, so the grey-beaked bird is about to take a little trip. Under the watchful eye of its foster father, of course. Carefully, Mr. Veltin's protégé is placed in a nest with a single young bird. This gives it a better chance of being accepted and looked after. The young stork remains motionless at first. From now on, he's on his own. Will the experiment be a success? One of the new foster parents approaches and accepts the new chick. The adoption is a success. Outside in the fields, it's peak activity time. The noise of the tractors lures the older storks. The parents have to find plenty of food for their chicks. Mowing the fields has made foraging a lot easier. Although the big machines are intimidating, the prospect of a delicious snack is too tempting. The relationship between stork and human is mutually beneficial. A few days later, stork fancier Uwe Weltin checks up on his former nursling. Everything's fine. The adoptee is flourishing and seems to have been fully integrated into the little family. Both parents look after the young birds. They share the housework and fieldwork in exemplary fashion. Three weeks later, at the end of July, the young birds can be seen standing up in the nest. Left alone for long periods of time, they get bored. Moving about helps to pass the time, so they play and fool around a lot. The young birds get fed less often by their parents now, which encourages them to start exercising their wings. There's hardly enough room for them all in the nest now. The parents often seek temporary accommodation nearby. They make sure they can still keep an eye on their young, though. For safety's sake, the young birds will be cared for until they move out, because the environment is new and full of surprises. The high point of the season is the annual Stork Festival. Visitors flock to Rühstädt in their thousands to admire the stars of the show in their rooftop eyries. Ranger Herper tots up the numbers for the visitors. This year there were 38 breeding pairs and 54 young birds. A good year.
Now they're trying to take the food directly from their parent's beak, but can't. So the parent bird regurgitates.
And there's another thing the Rühstädt villagers are happy about. They counted 30,000 stork watchers. Other feathered friends have to take second place, whatever antics they get up to. Is it the way they look? It's more likely because they just aren't big enough. Anyway, the sparrows aren't much competition for the storks. All the focus is on the white-vested roof dwellers. For many, they are the embodiment of a perfect, intact village society. After all the festivities, nothing is going to keep the fledglings under house arrest for much longer. At last, it's time. The first proper outing. Their initial successes spur them on to continue practicing. One of them takes an unintentional aerial detour and rights itself again. Power supply lines through the village could pose a hazard to the inexpert pilots. Realizing this, the villagers of Rühstädt ensured that their power supply cables were laid below ground, especially to protect the low-flying novices. The village's adoptee has also successfully completed his first couple of flying hours. At the beginning of August, the storks begin more often to allow the warmer upward thermals to lift them higher in the sky. Storks are master gliders. They circle higher and higher, preparing for their imminent departure. But beforehand, these migrators must tank up their food reserves. The grain harvest is the perfect preparation for a lavish stork picnic. Young and old seek out the biggest morsels. They forage mostly for the mice and worms that live in the grain fields. What to the farmer is a pest is their delicacy. Once again, the locals and their feathered visitors benefit from the synergy of living alongside one another. A short while later, autumn heralds its arrival in the water meadows of the Elbe. The Elbe and its banks still offer the storks enough food resources for them to survive, but this will soon change. Falling night temperatures and shorter days signal the migrating birds' departure, and their neighbors, the grey geese. All 140 storks in Rühstädt will soon leave their summer quarters. This puts Mayor Herper in a reflective mood.
The storks are valuable because their presence, their returning, imparts a sense of well-being. And in today's high-tech world, I think that's a message for the future.
Storks remain a symbol of an intact countryside environment, and for the villagers, they're an essential economic factor. In the middle of August, they set off for Africa. First the young birds, followed by the older ones. While the visitors turn their backs on the place for many months, the Stork Club still has plenty of work to do. Behind closed doors, planning for next year's nest cleaning is already underway. Because the storks will only return in large enough numbers if they're offered first-class service. Rühstädt settles down to wait out the 7 months for its summer tenants to come back. And peace descends on Germany's premier Stork Village.